Sweeney Talks 2, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Now, 2021 was a landmark year for those who are into extraterrestrials, UFOs, UAPs, whatever you may want to call it. It's a live issue. It's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Gary Heseltine, who is the Vice President of ICER, which stands for International Coalition of Extraterrestrial Research. So thank you for joining me today, Gary.
I'm more than delighted to be here. It's International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research.
My mistake. Thank you for correcting me.
It's all right. Your preparation skills are noted.
Well, as I was saying there, I mean, it's a real big issue at the moment. I mean, in your world, the sort of UFO world, UAP world, as we've said, I mean, it's 2021 was a lot of breakthroughs, but it's only going to get bigger. I mean, we're sort of on the cusp of a big change here. I
don't think people realize how important 2021 was. In my following of this subject, since having a childhood sighting at the age of 16, I'm now 61. So, 45 years, in my 45 years of following this subject, 2021 was the most important year in the history of the subject, in my opinion. And that was because there were simply so many legislative and important comments made by prominent people, especially in the United States, that alluded to something that we're getting very close to, which is an acknowledgement that we are dealing with something that is in the other category, which is non-human intelligence. And I kind of get a bit frustrated with the media, as I always have done, because they've never really reported properly on this. A lot of it to do with the stigma that was attached to the subject over many decades. But I think it's still not being reported widely enough. Yes, there are some good news pieces on news channels, but in everyday life, I don't think the message is hitting out that we are moving and edging to a very strange paradigm shift for humanity, because we are moving towards something that is pointing towards non-human. And that's going to be a huge shock to people if they don't get on board. And if you think about it, how do you get your information? It's got to be through the mainstream media. And I don't think that message is getting across yet, because until it starts to get a lot more daily coverage, people aren't simply aware. So yeah, you're aware. Some of your colleagues in the mainstream media are aware. There have been some good documentaries, more and more documentaries being made, but I still don't think that post the release of the D&I report on the 25th of June, that 9-page report that said 143 out of 144 cases can't be identified. And what it was saying really was 143 pilots couldn't identify what they were seeing in 143 of the 144 cases. I mean, that was pretty stark. And I think some members of the press began to really think, wow, that's a pretty big headline, that pilots flying the most sophisticated aircraft, hardware, can't understand what they're seeing. And, when you went into that D&I report, whilst a lot of people said, oh, it was just a sham, if you read between the lines, there were some very important things said. For example, it said that around 18 to 20 of the cases showed technology basically not yet invented. We can't even understand it. And we're not talking about lights in the sky anymore, which is what has dogged this subject with the stigma attached to it and trying to explain away all sightings. You're now talking about a true acknowledgement that there are craft. That's what they're saying, that there are craft flying around in the US airspace. And 20% of them, or 20 of these 143 unknown cases, show craft that are doing maneuvers that basically we can't replicate with terrestrial technology. This is getting pretty close to the wire. 80 of the cases, I think it said, had been picked up on multiple radar, sophisticated electronic systems, because we're now at a technical age of development where we're able to pick up, the technology has reached a level where we're able to pick up the signals of these things much better. So I think there's such a wealth of technological data that's now been amassed that I think over the next year, 2 years, you're going to reach a tsunami point where somebody's going to stand up and say, well, actually, we can rule out foreign technology. We can't replicate this with terrestrial technology. I don't think the President of the United States is ever going to stand up on the White House lawn, as some people would want, and say we're dealing with extraterrestrial, it is extra. I don't think that word will be used. I think they will go down the line of process of elimination. We thought it might be foreign technology, Chinese, Russian, secret American stealth, but with all the technological data that we've accumulated, we've studied all that, and we can now rule all of that out, because the leap in technology is simply too great. We cannot understand how these craft move, and therefore it begins to go into the category of other, which is what the DNI report said. Group 5, other. Well, group 5 is either extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence, and by that we mean possibly interdimensional, multiverse, or whatever, because quantum physicists are now saying that that's theoretically possible, but it's not human, and that is going to be the key. So I think the phrase non-human intelligence is going to be the thing that begins to grab the headlines for the media.
In terms of the DNI report, you know, which you're talking about, which was, you know, for anyone that's not seen it, you know, it was released by the US government. It's online. Anyone can see it. But, you know, I know you've spoken to people sort of maybe that are involved in things. I know you can't use names in all cases, but was that information around for quite a while? It must have been. Why do you think it came out in 2021? You know, what do you think it prompted the US government to say, right, here's this report and we're putting it out to the public?
I think it all stems from, and I think you know the answer to this, it all stems from the front page New York Times article on December 16, 2017. And the acknowledgement that there'd been a secret Pentagon study, the ATIP program, that was run by Luis Elizondo. Senator Harry Reid was responsible with a couple of other senators in getting the funding for that. That ran, I think, between 2007 2012, $22 million budget. And basically this went against everything that America had said for years, like we closed Project Blue Book 1969, we don't study UFOs anymore, there's nothing to it. And yet here there was this front page article saying, well, actually they've been doing a secret study and there's some very interesting things going on. Now, I think that was one of two key things. The New York Times article, New York Times had very rarely ever covered the UFO topic, and certainly never done a serious front page story. So that was unprecedented. But what also came from that, and I think is the real game changer, and I mentioned it before to you, is that when the 3 FLIR videos, the US Navy FLIR videos, the black and white videos captured by US Navy pilots, were released, I think that was the game changer, because that's the genie out of the bottle. Because for the first time, even the most skeptical, ardent astronomer, newspaper editor, TV editor could look at that footage and go, what is that? Moving across the screen. It was unambiguous. And as soon as those 3 videos were authenticated as US Navy genuine videos, then hoax goes out the window. We're then dealing with what is that? And especially the last video, the go past one, where it's skimming across the surface of the water and you see the camera trying to lock onto it, and then it locks on and he goes, whoa, got it. The excitement in his voice, like, what the hell is that? Now, these are experienced pilots. They know what's around in the sky, and they are absolutely flummoxed, and they're thinking, whoa, what is that? And, you know, it's the excitement in the voice gives it away as to what you're dealing with. Something very, very strange. And I think the videos are the game changer.
Yeah, I mean, the videos, I mean, I think some people made them under a name. Is it Oumuamua was one of the ones that was called? Is that correct? You know, that was kind of given that title. Is it? No,
that's totally different. There was 3.
I apologize.
Right. There were 3 basically FLIR videos, authenticated US Navy videos. The one that was really the first one, which is the FLIR video involving the USS Nimitz, the aircraft carrier, from 2004. And then there was what's called the gimbal, where you see the object rotating, and the commentator goes, it's rotating, it's rotating. What's it doing? It's rotating. And then the last one is the go fast. Oh, got it. And that's those 3. They're the Navy videos. And they're the ones that have changed the goalpost, because anybody can look at those and they're going to struggle to identify what they are. There is clearly something on the camera, clearly something moving, and clearly doing maneuvers that are a bit strange, especially the first one, the Nimitz one, because there's a lock on basically it's in the, you know, the camera's focused on it, and then it appears to just break the lock on and accelerate out the screen. Now, some skeptics will say, well, that's just the camera position and it's not being widely corrected. However, most people, and certainly the likes of the pilots who were involved, saying that that object did something that it can't really do, and it just shot off at an incredible speed. That's what that meant, that maneuver where it went out of the box. We can't do that. And so, you know, those videos are the genie out of the bottle, and you can't put them back. And even the likes of Michio Kaku, you know, superstar scientist, astronomer kind of thing, a physicist, etc., he will look at that, and he went, I've analyzed these frame by frame, and he changed his opinion. And he says now it's for the authorities to say that they're not extraterrestrial. That's how much those videos convinced him. Not everyone's convinced. You know, you have other scientists and sort of called really leading scientists who have still got their head in the dark. You know, Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of them. That's not real evidence. You know, show me the evidence. Well, he's in for a shock, because if he was to analyze all the data that's now been accumulated, which has never been released, by the way, and that's frustrating in itself. That data that's been accumulated, especially by the US Navy over the last pretty much 20 years, all of that should be given to scientists to examine. So we have independent research saying, yes, that's just pulled, that's done a maneuver that's just pulled 500 Gs. The max for terrestrial TV, terrestrial technology pilots, etc., is 11, 12 with special suits. Anything beyond that, you just can't do it. So, you know, we have objects that are dealing with 500 and 600 G turns, things like that. If you remember, Luis Elizondo, he went on the 60 Minutes program, and he said, you're dealing with objects that can travel at 13,000 miles an hour, can pull 500 to 600 Gs, no wings, no tail, no propulsion, obvious propulsion system, and they can also go underwater. You know, pretty big stuff. And he was the guy who ran the program. And it's the tip of an iceberg. And, you know, I think the world now is inevitably on a path where the momentum will grow year on year. And it will be, and I always liken it to like a dam about to break. First of all, there becomes a weakness in the dam, in the center of the dam. A few bricks come out of the dam, and so the pressure starts building on the center point of the dam. And then a few more bricks come out, and then the pressure gets so much that it's a collapse, total collapse. And this is what it will be in this subject. It won't be a gradual, yes, it is, we're edging. There will be, in my opinion, there will be a tsunami moment where the dam breaks, and then it's like so obvious that we've got to talk about it all the time. And you'll know about it because it'll be 24/7 on every news channel, like a terrorist incident happening anywhere around the world. That's when you know that we're into a different paradigm.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what prompted, you know, ICER, because, I mean, as I said at the start, you're the Vice President, International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. Now, maybe you could tell us, you know, the sort of idea behind it, because it was formed and released, you know, before that report came out. So obviously there was a group of you who knew that things were changing, and I guess that's why you brought this organization together. Well,
the story, basically, cutting it short, is that there was a failed Chinese initiative. It originally stemmed from a Chinese disclosure initiative. We were never quite sure how official the Chinese approach was. It was through Chinese ufologists, as it were, asking international ufologists to get together and see if they would create a coalition. Cutting a long story short, in 2018, I got involved and went to Moscow for a joint Russian-Chinese conference. And it was, I believe, funded by the Chinese, believe it or not. But anyway, a group of us went there, and from there, we had talks with the leader of what was a Chinese UFO group. We set out some basic ideas on what would be required to get us involved as a coalition. From that, we then went away and started contacting other well-known UFO researchers, scientists and academics saying, do you want to get involved in this process? It's a fledgling process. We don't know quite where it's going to go. And then the Chinese failed to deliver on what their initial story was. They were going to create a headquarters. They were going to fund everything. They were going to have a huge conference, create a huge building, like a UN type building in China. That all failed to materialize. So in a sense, a year afterwards, by October of 2019, we'd maybe identified 20 countries, potentially 20 national representatives in 20 countries. And so we had the broad idea of the coalition already there, and there was a lot of goodwill. And then, of course, we go into the early part of 2020 and we go into a lockdown pandemic situation. And then basically the world stops. Nobody's going anywhere. Everything's now through the computer screen via Zoom, Skype, or whatever. And that's the only way you can basically stay in touch with people. So it got through to June of, well, maybe April of 2020. And then I thought, if we don't act now, we're going to lose this goodwill. So I then took out a Zoom Pro account and then started contacting everybody on Zoom, because we're all in lockdowns, and saying, come on, let's not lose this goodwill. Why don't we try doing it ourselves and set up as an international NGO? And everyone said, well, we've no experience. And I said, well, I've no experience, but let's try. You know, let's not lose the goodwill. And so basically it's been the blind leading the blind, and it's been a learning curve for all of us. And we're not going to get everything right, because who would in these circumstances? But basically we are now at 27 countries. We were at 28. Sadly, one of our national representatives, Lakazar Filipov, died suddenly of a heart attack just before Christmas. And he was one of our top scientists, and he was an astrophysicist. He'd been a person who taught the Bulgarian astronauts. So that's how prominent he was. So a huge loss to ICER. So, you know, we're 27 countries. We were 28. We're now 27 countries. Coalition, we are now an internationally registered NGO. We're registered in Portugal, which is one of the countries that represents us. We're not for profit. You know, we're not in it to make any personal money. We're in it to make a difference. And ICER's main remit was to try to take this subject to the highest levels of governance, including the United Nations. So that's what our basic parameter was. And it was built on an oath that everyone who became either a national representative or a deputy national representative had to agree to, which was an oath, which basically said that we have studied this subject for over 75 years and basically concluded that, or acknowledged, that we're dealing with something that's either extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence, but it's real, it's intelligent, there's something interacting with planet Earth. And so that was the premise, that everybody who joins ICER has to sign. That's the prerequisite. If you don't sign it, you don't become in ICER. So we all did that. So I thought it was me that came up with the idea of the oath, because in the past, ufology, for want of a better word, there is, you know, UAPology doesn't work, but ufology works. And it's a far sexier term for me personally. But there, I digress. But the point being that historically, there's been some excellent UFO groups in history, like NICAP, AFRO, and things like that in the United States. And there's been some excellent, you know, brilliant international research done over the years. But the UFO community at international level had failed totally to come together as an organized representation of their subject. It was too bound and bogged down in egos. My group's better than your group. I don't believe you, blah, 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 blah. It was a lot of infighting. And so the idea of the oath was to say, well, look, if you want to be a part of ICER, you've got to agree to this oath. Everybody else has. So if you want to join us, that's the prerequisite. And the idea was to stop all that and say, look, we've got a coalition of like-minded people who want to pursue this at international level to make a difference on a global scale. Because in the end, it was all about, if we are dealing with something that is a global phenomenon, which it is, and we're dealing with something that's not human, that's probably extraterrestrial, probably many species involved, probably got a huge variety of agendas for coming to this planet. Some good, probably some bad, who knows? But the point is there's something interacting with this planet. And if we want to try and make a difference, we're talking about the human race. We're not talking about 50 human races like hundreds of countries. This is the one occasion, as Reagan used to say, what would happen if we were faced with an extraterrestrial threat? We'd soon forget our national differences and all come together as the human race. Well, in a sense, that's what we're trying to do with ICER and trying to say, look, this is not a country issue. This is a global issue. So we need to deal with it as the human race. And we have to start preparing people for all the things that are pointing to the fact that this is real. And we are dealing with some kind of non-human, likely extraterrestrial interaction. And so that's really why ICER came along. We, in a sense, began the meetings in June of 2020. And so we launched 11 months later on the 25th of May, 2021, a month ahead of the DNI report, which technically was due to come out on June the 25th. Everybody thought it was going to be delayed, but sure enough, we decided we'd go a month before so we could begin to position ourselves and say, we're out there, this is what we want to do. And that's, in a sense, what we've done since we've launched. You know, we are still only 7 months into our first year. So we're making strides. It's our setup year. We always thought that the first 12 months would be the initial setup of trying to, I guess, be recognized as a global player in the subject. And this is what we're trying to do. And we think that we are doing that behind the scenes. There's lots of things happening. You're right. I can't tell you who the people are I'm talking to, but we are talking to representatives and levels of diplomacy, diplomats of other countries. But of course, this subject is still kind of a bit of a taboo subject. The stigma is quickly disappearing, which is great, but still some countries are reluctant to publicly say, oh, actually, we are making some inquiries. And that's where we're at the moment. We're in a bit of a halfway house. But believe me, you know, behind the scenes, we are talking to some very prominent people in many countries about this issue. And I think you will find that the United States is doing that a lot as well. And they have now acknowledged that they now need to reach out. And in the new legislation that was agreed just before Christmas, the GRG amendment, you know, the Gillibrand amendment, basically, that came in, that said we have to make this more transparent and take it away, and make the intelligence services responsible to the Congress and Senate, and not the other way around, be dominated by just what the intelligence services, what they wanted to do. That GRG amendment, the Gillibrand amendment, was significant because it took the responsibility away from the intelligence services to say, no, the Congress, you have to report to us and give us a public report, an unclassified report every year. We've never had that. It's huge. Plus, they will deliver twice a year an unclassified report, a classified report that we won't see. But we already know from the classified report that was released just before the DNI report in June 25th, that many of the senators and congressmen, women, who saw the extra videos that we didn't get to see in the public world, they had 40 minutes of being shown videos of these objects. And some of the people who saw them described them as like hair standing on the back of your neck. And for the first time, they realized that we are dealing with something that's not terrestrial. That's the inference from everything that's said. So my argument now is to say, look, if we come together and this starts to gain momentum in the mainstream media, there will be a lot of pressure brought on them to start releasing these good videos. You can take away whatever, you know, data that's contained with them, but just show us the images and let the public see them. You know, why can't you just take the image itself and take away all the other height, you know, coordinates and whatever, take all that off, but let the public see these videos and release the data to scientists, to universities to study, independent bodies to study. so that we can start to all focus in independently on analysing the data that's been accumulated. And the sooner you do that, the sooner we'll make this transition to an acknowledgement that we are dealing with something that's non-human. And that's what needs to happen. But there's huge shifts now. And I honestly can see that within the next 2 to 3 years, that we're going to be getting to that dam breaking point. And if you remember, if you've heard of a case called the Phoenix Lights from 1997, which is the number of lights seen over Phoenix, and thousands and thousands of people had seen this huge boomerang-shaped object or V-shaped object, tracked it for maybe 200 miles, and then it stops. The lights come on in a certain pattern. They try to explain it away as flares. That was 1997. Then we're dealing with VHS videos, not so great quality of footage, etc. But imagine we had a similar incident like that now, with the sophisticated phone cameras now that you've got. We had something that was tracked for 200 miles, low, flying over your house. People are going to be filming it on their phones, blah, blah, blah. People are going to be ringing in, and we're going to get, it'll go viral. If we had an incident now, we have the ability to go viral quickly as a live event. We didn't have that facility, 25 years ago, but we have that now. And so I think that even though countries would naturally probably want to clamp down, we're not far off of a point where you don't have a choice, because the technology has reached a stage where you cannot control the masses so quickly to not prevent it. You see what I mean? As soon as somebody starts saying, whoa, what is this huge object going over our house, and as the cameras are able to pick it up, then they're going to go to a live event. Then it go viral. Literally, things can go viral very, very quickly. And within an hour, you can have millions, if not hundreds of millions of people watching a live event take place. So we're one event like that away from that dam breaking. Because how could you contain that? And that's because technology has reached a point where we can actually, we can't prevent it if there's a major incident. Before you could, governments could clamp down, cover stories or whatever, but we are reaching a point now where technology will mean that that's impossible to do.
I mean, I think what's very interesting what you were talking about there is, also the media perception, they kind of always sort of, before the subject was always treated with a certain amount of irony or kind of humour, and not given the full sort of, if someone reported something, it was always made a bit of a joke in some ways. And with ICER, I mean, I know that is that a big issue, because it's not just the media, it's the public that we're all sort of brought up and told that, aliens don't exist and UFOs are, it's all just for movies. So is that quite a hard thing to counter, people's own internal bias? And also, I noticed you're running sort of classes, you're running a sort of course to sort of bring people into the world, which is part of your work. So people that don't know about it, just got an interest, you can sort of bring them in and say, okay, here's some of the basics and here's some of the things you can learn about and understand.
Well, let's deal with the first point. It's huge what's happening now, and if the world doesn't begin to prepare for what's likely to come down the road in the next, I think, 2 to 5 years, I think we're going to reach that disclosure point. We call it kind of disclosure, and the disclosure process has already begun because of everything that's happening legislative wise in America, and countries now talking to each other on this issue. But in essence, the real big disclosure day is when it's 24/7 and it's on the news. That's when you know that you've made that tip into the mainstream, when it's 24/7 on every news channel. And it would be, because everybody acknowledges that as and when contact, however we want to phrase it, is acknowledged by the masses, it will be the most profound moment in human history, because it's a huge paradigm shift and it has huge implications. A lot of potentially good implications, because what happens if we are able to interact with these objects, find a level of communication? Who knows that if they're millions of years ahead of us, they may be able to solve our medical issues and whatever, just like that. Technologically, we could have huge gains from interacting with a species if they gave us that technology. But obviously, again, the way the human race is, you've got to be very guarded, because we're not good you know, superior technology usually destroys, you know, lesser technology. Now, let's hope they're a bit more intelligent than us and they don't want to do that. But if they've been around here for a long time, and they probably have been coming here for thousands of years, you know, if you go back to petroglyphs and all around the world, there's so bizarre things that have been seen on rocks and stories from sky gods and things like that, traditions. The odds are they've been coming for a long time, but we can't prove that. So we can only go in the modern world. The modern world is really the last 70 years. But if we're reaching a point where this is almost a point of no return, and it's going to be acknowledged, and I do think it's going to happen now. I really do. I don't see how, with everything that happened in 2021, you can stop this momentum that is building. You know, because even the most ardent newspaper editors are now realizing, well, actually, there is something going on. They're still not reporting on it enough, but they are acknowledging that it's real. And bit by bit, that momentum is gathering. Now, let's say that in 3 years' time, there is this big 24/7 moment where it's on every news channel, and there is this breakthrough moment, it's acknowledged. What happens if we have done no kind of preparation for the public in that 3 years, and then suddenly you're going to turn on your 6 o'clock news? Yes, actually, it's now been announced that contact has been established. There is an interaction going on with non-human intelligences. Whoa, that's going to be a huge revelation. And if we learn anything from the likes of a pandemic and lockdowns, is that the huge number of mental health issues that's arisen from being lockdowns, because we'd never had lockdowns before, and people were confined, you couldn't see your loved ones. Now, not everybody is going to be affected by an announcement that says, yes, we're dealing with some non-human intelligence, but it will be a paradigm shift because it affects everything. Because it will rewrite your history books. A lot more information is going to come out, and the way we move forward is never going to be quite the same, because we will know that we're not alone in the universe, like we're still ponder now, technically, you know. But at least publicly, that's what they're saying. We don't know. We have no proof of life elsewhere. But that's going to change. Now, a proportion, probably 20% of the public, will have a psychological reaction. And I'm not saying this 20% as on any grounding, but I would say that a proportion of public will have a reaction psychologically to finding out that they are not alone. And that is, in a sense, why we began to think of how do we prepare the world for this huge paradigm shift? How do we prepare the world that something that was deliberately stigmatized in 1953 with the Robertson panel, group of scientists, 1953, met 2 days, commissioned by the CIA. How do we get rid of the UFO, not UFO, flying saucer problem? How do we strip the aura that the public have, the fascination the public have? And they concluded after 2 days, we do it through using the media. We use all forms of the media and debunk everything. TV, newspaper, radio, magazine, etc. And that worked fantastically well. And that's where the stigma came from. So anybody born after 1953 has lived in a world of deliberate debunking. And that's where the stigma comes from. Now we realize that actually we were being lied to. There is a lot more to it. But we're not quite at the stage, at least in the media, of saying, and at a political level, saying we are dealing with non-human. But we're moving towards that because of the data that's been accumulated, the performance characteristics. So it's coming. There's no two ways about it now. I believe within 2 to 5 years, this 24/7 moment is coming, in my opinion. So if we don't prepare, there's going to be a section of society all around the world that is going to feel threatened, vulnerable, and psychologically unprepared. That could lead to a huge mental health issue like the pandemic and the lockdown, something new. This is going to be a huge paradigm change. So what ICER is trying to say from the off is, we're at the halfway house now. We should be asking the what if question. What if it is real? We should be doing something about it now. And that's basically what we're asking of governments. If it is, you know, possible now that it might be, we should be thinking about what we do to counteract that. And if it is real, what do we say to the public? Do we just announce it one day on the news and then people go around, what? Nah, there's nothing to this. They won't believe it. So the idea is to create awareness courses. So I was one of the people that pushed this, is that we have to create educational programs to say, look, this is how we begin to deal and educate the public about this subject. And I can actually reveal something to you. Yes, you alluded to the course that we've just announced, that I will be running the first evidential history course. Now, initially, we put that out with a charge, an administrative charge to cover our costs, etc. We're not for profit, it's not for anybody, but we do have administrative charges, etc. However, we've rethought that, and I'm going to tell you now in this exclusively that that evidential history course is going to be refunded price-wise. It's going to be free, and every evidential history course is going to be free from this point on. And it's the realization that we want as many people from whichever country to have access to the real information, the real truth. So let's not charge for that at all. It will always be free. That first course is when somebody in Russia, someone in Finland, someone in Africa can say, can I go on that course? And it's going to be free and accessible, and they're going to be given the history of the last 75 years on this subject as best we can present it, over 6 hours, over 2 sessions. And you see what I mean? It should be accessible to everyone. Now, it may well be that down the line we are creating other specialist courses that there'll be some administrative charge or a voluntary donation asked or whatever. But we kind of rethought it, and we thought, no, actually, we want to reach people all around the world, and they shouldn't have to pay for it. All they need is an internet access, which we now is pretty much worldwide, and they can say, can I do that course? And we'll be running these courses more and more. And the idea is we want it to be accessible for everybody. So that press release will be going out in the next few days, but seeing as I'm talking to you, I might as well tell you about it. So
that's great. I mean, that's fantastic, Gary, isn't it? I mean, sort of sharing the expertise. And I just wanted to sort of touch on you personally, because, people maybe listening to this and going, well, what's Gary's background? But, the great thing about yourself is you don't come from the academic background. You come from the investigative background. You're a former police detective in England.
Yeah. I mean, my background is simple. 6 years Royal Air Force Police from 1983 to 89, and then I joined the British Transport Police in 1989, retired early to launch my own online magazine, UFO Truth Magazine. I lecture on this subject all around the world. I'm very lucky to be doing something I'm passionate about. And my remit has never been to gain personal wealth. I'm not bothered about money at all. It's to try to make a difference to the man on the street. And that's, in a sense, what these awareness courses do, because it allows the man, the woman on the street, the child on the street, the teenager on the street to say, can I do that course? Yeah, it doesn't cost you a thing. Just put your name down. And as long as it's in the right language, and of course, initially it's going to be in English, and then there'll be a Spanish version, and then we'll develop other national languages, etc. But you've got to start somewhere. But we've now recognized that we want to make this accessible, because if you think about it, how do you prepare the public unless you can give them a basic history lesson? So the evidential history course is that preparatory course to 99% of the world who are oblivious to it. That's going to be their first interaction with the subject. If it was announced tomorrow, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? Are they going to go into the bookshops and say, well, can you tell me about the last 75 years? No, because we don't have a definitive history. Yes, there are some very good books, but not all bookshops. And where are they found? In the mind, body and spirit section. They're not in the history section. Well, there soon will be books on this subject in the history section, because once it's acknowledged, that's history. And the awareness courses are basically going to say, look, we're going to do the job that, in a sense, society hasn't done by getting its act together to say, look, there is a real history to this subject. And it's not just America, it's not just the UK, it's all countries. Every country has had brilliant sightings, but every country's dealt with it in slightly different ways. America, to date, has dominated this subject. They have had their fingers in every big sighting that's occurred all around the world for the last 70 years. That is a reality. Well, people don't know this. So basically, the evidential history course is free to anyone who wants to find out the real history. And I also think a lot of the press will start coming on board and saying, can we do that? So we're actually developing a course for the press, because they have been duped as well. Because if they're born after 1953, they've lived in this world of debunking where there's no to this subject. Well, actually there is. And it is probably going to be revealed as the biggest conspiracy that society has created that turns out to be true, that we are dealing with non-human intelligences. And I think some people like you and others, Leslie Kane and people like that, Ralph Blumenthal, they're top people in their journalistic worlds. They are realizing that they have been duped, that there is a real story, and we need to start doing something about it and spreading this word. Well, the ICER courses are going to be doing that. And, we recognize literally within a week of putting out the press release about the first course that actually our aim is to not make money. It was never about making money, but just covering costs. But we actually think that this first evidential history course should be accessible to anybody, anywhere in the world. As long as they've got an internet connection, they can say, can I go do that course? And they will get 6 hours of history from people who are the top people in this field. And they're a mix. Don't forget, ICER is not just ufologists. It's a mixture of scientists, academics, and ufologists. And the ufologists are the top people in their country. So, you've got people like Don Smith, who's the top guy on Roswell. He's one of the executive council members. You've got people like Susan Hanson, who is the top, but definitively the top researcher in New Zealand. Cheryl Gottschall, one of the top researchers in Australia. So we're all already on 5 continents. And so basically, we think that over time, we will soon get to 30 countries plus. We alluded to the fact that in our launch, we wanted to take it to the highest levels of governance. Well, the highest levels of governance really are the United Nations. And we launched a project, Project Titan, that has received quite a lot of attention around the world, media-wise. And that is for a small republic, the country of San Marino, which has for over 20 years run UFO conferences in this beautiful little enclave, 30,000 people, castle on the top, very scenic. I've been to it a couple of times, but the person that organized that was Roberto Panotti, who was our president of ICER. He's been around for 50 plus years in this subject, and very respected. They've been liaising with the San Marino government at a local group level for a long time, and often the San Marino government would give them donations to help pay for the conferences. Well, what we've decided is that it's probably easier bureaucratically to go to a smaller country to see if you can get to the United Nations. I can't ask a question, you can't ask a question of the UN. Only countries can ask questions of the UN. So you've got to get a country to support you first. So basically we have approached San Marino government. I was met with the culture minister along with several other people from ICER, and we gave documents saying, look, this might be the right time for you to adopt this idea of asking the United Nations to fund a yearly top research conference in San Marino and make it like the Geneva of the, we talk of the Geneva Convention, something like that, and make it a really important. Now, this small country could suddenly be really elevated on this issue because it would be backed by the United Nations. So basically, we've gone to San Marino and said, look, this may be very good, the right time now, with everything that's coming out, to go and adopt this proposition and take it to the floor of the United Nations and say, look, we want this raising on at UN level. And it has to be a country that says that, can't be a private body. So a country, they adopt this and say, look, we need to have a debate in the United Nations. Now, the last time that happened was 1978, when the Grenada Initiative. And basically, that was not the right time. And basically, there was some limited time given to talk about it, but it was basically put to one side, left on file. Nothing really happened. And quickly, the Prime Minister, Eric Gairy, was quickly deposed in a coup. Read into that what you will. But he he wasn't there to push it after that. What we got now is, we're so many years down the line, there's a real chance now, because of everything that's coming out evidentially, the FLIR videos, the legislative changes in America, that this might be the right time to really go back to the United Nations and say, look, we do need to have, at a global human race level, a serious discussion. So if San Marino go there and say, look, we want to have a full UN debate on the UAP subject, which is the popular term now, UAP, they can do it. So that has been with them for several months. Bureaucracy takes ages. We've certainly not got a rejection. And only recently, Roberto Panotti, the head of ICER, president of ICER, he met with the heads. They have two governments there, two heads of state, because each heads of state, it's a strange kind of setup, but basically the government changes every 6 months. So there's two heads of state. And he recently had a further meeting with the two heads of states to talk about this initiative of going to the UN, because now we get into a kind of serious level that there is a real possibility that they might back this and take it to the UN. And if the UN said, yes, we will back you and make this a United Nations backed UAP center, that would be huge. And that would go around the world media wise. So this is because nothing ever happened like this before. So we're on the edge potentially of another huge breakthrough on an international scale. Can you imagine now the interest with everything that's going on now, if there was a full UN debate on UFOs, that the United Nations said, yeah, we're going to back San Marino, we're going to give you money, we want to get to the bottom of this. What a difference that would be, because then all countries, that's when it becomes global and it goes away from the United States. And it needs to go away from the United States, because no one country should have possession of most of the influence. And that's where it's been for the last 70 years with America. We need to raise this as a global issue. And that's one of the reasons why ICER was created, is to say that it's the human race. If this is real, it's not going to be one country defending the earth or interacting, communicating with whatever. It's going to be the human race. There is only one human race. So we've got to start beginning to come together and sit around the table and put aside egos, put aside national differences and say, look, this is a human race issue. And I daily look to get in those kind of negotiations, because we have to get rid of this arrogance that has dogged science, dogged the ufology subject, dogged the political system. We have to strip all that away and just recognize that we're on the edge of something really profound.
Well, I think the pandemic sort of happening, I think hopefully people out there can understand that, sometimes things are bigger than one particular nation, and we can all,
absolutely,
we're all, we don't all experience things the same way, but we all experience similar things. And, situations we can see the commonality, and coming together, obviously with the vaccines and all these type of things has been the way out of it. If we each done it by country, I think the world would have been absolute chaos at the moment. And I suppose it is in chaos in some ways, but and even more of a chaos, should I say?
No, I agree. The kind of who'd have thought we'd ever go through a pandemic, but we have, and so many lessons will be learned as a result of these strange circumstances. Because we're of an age that we didn't go through the Second World War and the Blitz and things like that. I'm sure in years to come, people said, do you remember going through the pandemic and the lockdowns, lockdown 1, lockdown 2, because it was unprecedented. And that just showed that all the world dealt with an issue. No country got away with it. They've all had to deal with it in their own way. And most have largely dealt with it in the same way. And the fact that we came together and created vaccines in incredible time within a year is unprecedented, that there was that worldwide cooperation. And so if you think about it, that is probably the first example, other than world wars, where the world come together as one to say, look, we have this global threat. If we can't control this and the mortality rate increased or whatever, we could have millions dying. So this is the first time really the world came together to solve a problem. And I think it showed what we can do if we face things together. So, on a different scale, I mean, what I don't want to convey to people is that there's a threat element. Technically, this issue has been raised, and the legislative changes that have gone on in the United States have been built around the air safety issue. And there is clearly an air safety issue. The DNI report said that I think 11 or 12 pilots nearly had near collisions with these objects. That's how, fast they move and how close they were to the aircraft. Now, there are clearly air safety implications for passenger aircraft, commercial aircraft. If these things are flying around, there's an air safety issue. But it doesn't mean that there are no overt threats in terms of an invasion threat, that kind of thing. And we would say that through the evidential history course, there's clear correlations to these objects being seen over sensitive military bases all around the world. There's a clear correlation to nuclear weapons over this subject. Now, that would infer that they either have some interest in not destroying the planet. That's the inference, is why they're interested, or there is another reason. But at the moment, there is no overt threat, because it seems like they've been around for a good 70 years and they've never attacked us yet in that sense. So if their technology is far superior, we don't know how many species are coming here, if they're indeed extraterrestrial, but likely extraterrestrial, how many species are coming here. They obviously could have, but they haven't. So maybe they look at us as just a primitive race. And again, this is a paradigm shift, that how the arrogance of humanity has to say, but we might just be the ants in the playground. Do we walk in the forest and got down and start talking to the ants or the bugs on the floor? We don't, because we think, no, we're so superior. But what if we are so primitive in terms of a species that's 1 million years ahead of us? We would be the ants in the playground. So we have to, this is part of the paradigm shift, is realizing that we are not at the forefront. We think that we're sentient beings, we're intelligent, we can create stuff and whatever. So that's good. But what if there's a level beyond that that we just can't even comprehend? So all of these things are part of this paradigm shift, of the implications. And that's why I say that as and when it's acknowledged, it will be the most profound moment in human history. And we have to begin to realize this. And it doesn't mean that everybody who's a top scientist in Harvard, Yale, or whatever, they've got all the answers. They haven't. Not on this issue. And they are all going to be the ants in the playground, maybe. We also don't know if this has been real and stuff. For example, if Roswell was real and there was a crashed alien vehicle, as the story goes, recovered in 1947, and perhaps bodies were recovered too. All of this is seen as now Independence Day, kind of a conspiracy theory. But if that was real, and I do believe that Roswell was real, I do believe that it was a crashed UFO, as in alien technology, and that was recovered then, I do believe that. What does the secret world? We only know 10%, if 10% in the public domain. There's a hell of a lot gone on over the last 70 years in the secret world. I don't think we're ever going to get to know that. Because I think people are then going to be saying, what, you knew this 70 years ago, blah, blah, blah. I just don't think they want to make that big admission. But if it's real and it's acknowledged, and people like Luis Elizondo kind of thinks that Roswell's real, and he's made several comments to that effect. Yeah, he won't know definitively, but he'll know a lot better than me and a lot better than you. And if he's saying that, I think it's pretty real. If that's happened, then undoubtedly there will have been loads of done secret research done. So who knows what will emerge when the dam breaks and what comes out in terms of what they reveal. I don't think they're going to be that transparent, but at least we're going to have this 24/7 moment. That's when you know it happens. When it's on 24/7, that's when you know that humanity has suddenly gone, yeah, threshold has been reached, collapsed down, let's talk about this. And it'll be 24/7.
My final thing to ask you, I mean, you've been very generous with your time, so thank you, Gary. But the thing I wanted to ask you finally, I guess it's the best till last, shall we say? What is your view on what we're dealing with? I mean, you talked about communication, you talked about maybe they're coming here as combatants. What do you think this craft represents? And do you think we're going to have another sort of species on Earth one day? Do you think other sort of objects, if we take the movie Men in Black, for example, are we going to have aliens walking about on Earth? I mean, what's your own views on it, and what do you think they're here for?
I think the evidence over 70 years suggests very strongly, compelling a case to say that we are dealing with something that's extraterrestrial. That's my personal belief, that we're dealing with something extraterrestrial. I think probably many species come here. I've said it many times. Why do they come here? I think because when we detonated the atomic bomb, that sent a signal out into space that we'd reached a level of technological achievement, that we were able to create nuclear fission and potentially destroy this beautiful planet. So I think that that's why they started to come in numbers. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that the Roswell incident was a crash involving a UFO seen next to the world's first atomic bomb squadron. When you put it in that context, it's maybe not so odd why they were, a UFO would be sniffing around the world's first atomic bomb squadron. It's a logical leap. Ooh, what are these? These are capable of destroying the planet. So I think there's probably many species coming here. What their agendas are, I have no idea. But it strikes me that so far they've not done anything really overt to threaten us. Let's hope that continues. I think that there are probably different agendas that they've got. So who knows? I'm not going to go down the line of going down like the Men in Black analogy, because we're so far off that. And you don't want to take it into the crazy world, because don't forget, we're still governed by the stigma. And it's fast receding, but let's make a step-by-step approach. But at least now we're beginning to acknowledge that we're very close to a paradigm shift. And the fact that you're having this discussion with me means that you're interested to know more about this potential paradigm shift. So your attitude has changed, that you're giving me as a ufologist, somebody 5 years ago you wouldn't even talk to, because we're all crazy people, but maybe we're not so crazy. And now that there is now a momentum building that we actually do have to have some discussion, and it's not a country issue, it's a global issue. So for me, I think, the next 3 to 5 years, well, from now to the next 5 years, I think it's coming. I think there's an inevitable tsunami building that will put pressure on the mainstream to have that breakthrough and acknowledgement that we're into a new paradigm. So there's lots of things, but let's take it step by step. But the momentum is, I think, growing. And if 2021 was anything as an example, if 2022 got half as good as that, we're going to be very, very close by the end of 2022. Because
it's exciting times ahead.
Oh, it is. It's unprecedented, and that's what I say to people, that it's unprecedented. But we need you guys. We need you guys to take this seriously and put pressure on. The UFO community is not strong enough to do it on its own. We need the likes of mainstream journalists, investigative journalists, to say, let's ask questions of politicians. Why don't you tell us more? Why aren't we been having this more serious study, an open study? Because what if it is real? We're getting close to that what if moment. And, I am a big proponent to say that the media so far has let us down on this subject. And since the DNI report came out, there's not been enough mainstream media. So go back to your editors and say, look, we need more coverage, because this is coming. If we don't, we can have some psychological effects that, we could have prevented. We have a moment now to start preparing. And I think it's important that we start doing that now.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. Very interesting, very insightful. Hope everyone's enjoyed it. I'm sure they have. You've really given us an insight into that. And, we're on a cusp of big things. So I wish you well. And thank you again for joining me.
Anytime, Chris. Thank you very much.